Good morning, all. Good morning. I want you all to take a deep breath so you don't get seasick. I just took a cruise. Some of you know that. And I just got back last week. And I didn't know, but there's little crystals in your brain that go back and forth from ear to ear in a liquid. And as you get older, those crystals don't move as fast as they're supposed to. So guess who got seasick? But you know what? I didn't give up. I figured the ship was rocking this way. So if I laid on the bed the other way, the crystals didn't have to go back and forth. And you know what? It actually worked. I had dinner that same evening with a retired surgeon, and I was telling him about it. He said, you know what? I'm going to write a medical report about that. Anyway, it was a great cruise. It's nice to get away from here occasionally, and it's also nice to get back with all you folks here. So before we get started, I'm going to ask a former Navy guy. He never got seasick in his life. All right, Bob, if you give us a little prayer this morning.
I did get seasick, and I didn't know about the crystals. You join with me in prayer. We give thanks, oh God, again for your wonder and for your grace, for the new day and for your provision for all of our needs. We thank you for the wonders of the ocean and seas, grateful for the beauty of the earth and the beauty of your love and care for us. Thank you for this day. Bless us as we gather together and learn about your ways in Christ's name.
Amen. Thank you, Bob. We have with us this morning Gene Udell. Dr. Udell is a retired professor from the University of Alabama, correct? Mechanical engineer, and he's brought along a sailboat. So any of you that want to, I think his students gave you that when you retired. So if you, at the end, if you want to talk to him about the sailboat, he's more than willing to, and any questions about sailing, this man knows. And my co-producer up here, I don't know if you guys know him or not, but he asked me to introduce him, because he's the co-producer. So anyway, again, good morning, and let's get started here. Where do we start? Let's go start with good old Christopher Columbus, because everybody knows about Christopher Columbus, but he did this, that, and the other thing. But on second thought, let's not. All right? Let's start around 1000 BC, long, long time ago, a little before Christ's time. All right? The early Chinese started sailing their coastline and ventured east to Taiwan, and then further east to the Pacific Islands. So a lot of what took place in the Pacific Islands started with the Chinese sailing in an easterly direction out in the Pacific. The Polynesians sailed in open canoes without riggers and junk-type sails. Let's do a little picture here. All they had basically was a canoe without riggers that came out, which kept the canoe on a neat, somewhat even plane as they sailed. And they had a number of people in here with paddles. And what is called a junk sail. Junk sail has two main masts and two. So here you have a junk sail. Again, like all sailing, you had to go either with the wind, because if you were going into the wind, obviously the junk sail would push you in the opposite direction. But they sailed all over the Pacific with these outrigger canoes. By the way, has everybody here taken a cruise or on a boat? Yes? Everybody here?
Some voluntary and some involuntary.
What's that?
I say some voluntary and some involuntary.
Okay. Okay. Look, I think you missed one.
I got one.
Early Chinese, oh no, that's the one we just did.
Polynesians.
Give us one more. Okay, and then the Mediterranean, all right, around the years 600 to 300 BC, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, and the Arabs were sailing the Mediterranean and even past Gibraltar and the coastline of Europe and West Africa, which I'll point a few of these out on the globe here for you, as soon as I find my. If you look at the globe, here's the Mediterranean right here, and they were, for the most part, sailing from here, and they came out through the Mediterranean. Here's Gibraltar, which is narrowed down, and went up the coast, which is now Europe, and they went south along the coast of Africa. So there was quite a bit of area covered even back then, as far as sailing with very little knowledge. They had no, where are we? They ventured. Their ventures were made by piloting. You know, there is a difference in just the verbiage here between navigation and piloting. Piloting, for the most part, is where you can see land or be able to get a position, where navigation, you're in the open water all the time. So these ventures were mainly by piloting within the sight of land, or by early navigation tools such as the lead line. The lead line is a line which is on the bow, they take to the bow of the ship, not knowing the water depth, and throwing it overboard. It was weighted and went down, and they were able to measure how deep the water was as they went along the coastline. So, and they started developing charts, very rudimentary type charts, keeping track of this. In fact, they ran down to Staples and got one of those spiral books, and they were making entries into spiral books so that they had it when they sailed again. They also used an instrument called a quadrant. Quadrant is actually the beginning of a sextant. And I'll try to draw a picture of it on the board here. The reason I dotted that in is because it can be moved up and down. It was fastened back here. The purpose of the quadrant was to be able to measure angles either to the sun or to other celestial bodies. So if you try to keep this with the curvature of the earth, and you need roughly 3 miles to get out here. So you keep this as level as possible, looking at the horizon, and you could move this arm up or down, which gave you a angular distance from where you were to the celestial body. So and today, the sextant does basically the same thing. It has a bunch of mirrors and all kind of other instruments fine-tuned. The problem that this creates is if you make a 1 degree error, you can be as much, a 5 degree error, you can be as much as 1 nautical mile off. So it doesn't take, and I know this from a fact because I took a celestial navigation course where I was on land and knew latitude and longitude, and I still was about 3 miles from where I wanted to be. So it doesn't take much to make an error in this. But this was adjustable so they could measure this angle to a celestial body. They also did one other thing, which isn't up here. They created what is known as an LOP, a line of position. So as they were sailing along, here's the coastline, if there was a mountain or something here, they were able to get a compass bearing on that mountain. The problem being, they didn't know if the LOP, line of position, was here, or the LOP, the line of position here, or the line of position all the way over here. So you cannot establish where you are by a single LOP, except for one thing. If they knew the water depth, and they knew the water right here was 100 feet deep, and here was 60 feet, all right? So that gave them a pretty good proximity of where they were in relationship to the shoreline. They had an LOP, a single LOP, and a water depth. So that gave them 2 references to be able to find their position. They also had a rudimentary compass. You're taking a picture of me or a picture of that? All right. Right now I need a volunteer. And I already picked a volunteer. Martha, you want to come up here? She was sitting in the back hoping I wouldn't call her. I even have a special chair for her. The only thing that Martha has to do today is be the sun. All she has to sit there and beam already, and you're going to be the sun for me. You're going to just sit there and be the sun. Now, as most of us don't realize it, but the sun doesn't move. Our universe is around our sun, so Martha, all she has to do is sit there and be the sun. She doesn't have to move at all. So our Earth, all right, let me go to the board here. Around 300 AD, the Greeks determined that the Earth was round. And the Greeks had some really sharp mathematicians that were able to do a lot of this. And then, by the way, they also went down to Staples and got one of those ring spiral books to keep track of all the information that they had gathered. All right, they figured out that the Earth was round, 365 degrees, which is 24,900 miles, and that it rotates every 24 hours. So our sun is there, and this Earth that we're on spins around every 24 hours. All right. Not only does the Earth spin around every 24 hours, but the Earth, let me get the little one, makes it a little easier. The Earth is on a 22.5 degree angle, as you can see here. And thank God it is, because if it wasn't, if it was this way, the people on the equator would be roasted, and the people up here would freeze to death if they were. So what happens, not only does the earth spin counterclockwise every 24 hours, but in how many days does it go around the sun?
365.
How many days does it take for the earth to make one revolution around the sun?
360.
365 days, that's a year, except for every 4 years you have a little correction. So it takes Martha sitting there for 365 days and doesn't do a thing. As the earth is rotating, all right, it is also going around the sun. So when we say, oh, the sun is rising from the east, that's a misnomer. The sun hasn't done anything. The earth has moved, so the earth comes up, and guess what? Because it goes in a counterclockwise motion, it sets in the west, okay? The Greeks also came up with the idea that because of 24 hours to go around the earth, they divided it up into 15-degree segments, which equals 360 degrees. So I'm gonna pass this around, and you can all look at this and see the divisions on the earth. Pass it from one person to the other. You can see the divisions on the earth. The big one's too hard to push around. They also figured out that measuring the angle of the sun and moon at noon to the horizon. Here we go back to here, which is very interesting. What happened this past Sunday? Does anybody know what happened on Sunday? It fall it was full. The sun at noontime was exactly over the equator at noon on Sunday. Where now is it starting to go? It's going south to another 22 and a half degrees south to the Tropic of Capricorn. And that happens because of the tilt of the earth as it goes around the sun for that 360 degrees, or 360 days. The easiest way, and by the way, the easiest way to find out where you are in the world would happen on Sunday. Because if you were on the equator at noontime, the sun is right there, directly overhead. All right. Now think about the 15-degree segments. Here I am in Egypt. Where am I in Mobile? All right, the sun is not over my head. All right, it's whatever the time difference is between Egypt and Mobile to get the sun over my head. So that's why we have these different time zones of 15 degrees each. The easiest, other than what happened on Sunday, is the Big Dipper, the North Star. think everybody has looked up and said, you know what, there really has to be a God. All right, all you have to do is look up there. And one of the things you see is the Big Dipper. Well, at the far end of the Big Dipper is the North Star. So it's easy to follow, and it's also easy to take an angle on. Let's go back to our quadrant, which we have here. All right, at the zenith, meaning the high point of when the North Star is at the high point. All right, then it starts to fall off. So, oops. That angle that you can measure with the quadrant or sextant gives you your latitude in the world. If you looked at the globe that I passed around, it has lines that go around the globe, like you slice bologna. Everyone is parallel to each other, all right, called the latitude. So from the angle here to that North Star creates the angle that you're above the equator. This is 0. Does anybody know what we are, where we live?
Like 30-some degrees.
30.
Around 30-some degrees.
34 degrees. We're 34 degrees above the equator.
How'd you know that, Bill? How'd you know that? Oh, okay. That explains
Good
it.
thing to know.
Wait till trivia.
All right, so anyway, the North Star and the zenith, they've determined the latitude north and south, just like the lines I just drew here. All right, 1 minute of latitude equals 1 nautical mile. That's where a nautical mile comes about. All right, so if you go from here all the way up, it's 90 degrees. So 1 minute, it's easy like your watch. Instead of hours, it's degrees, minutes, and seconds. So 1 minute, and that's an important part. 1 minute of latitude equals 1 nautical mile. So when somebody says I'm going 10 knots, which is the same as saying you're going 10 nautical miles per hour, all right? You're going actually, how many, 6,076 feet per, nautical mile in comparison to 5,280 for a statute mile. Oh my goodness. Does anybody have any questions on what we've covered so far? Okay, let's go back to good old Christopher Columbus. All right, Columbus already knew the world was round. So this fable of the world being square was a lot of nonsense. All it was PR that he was trying to get, that he was going to prove that the world was round. All right, back in 16 AD, or 600 AD, a long time before 1492, all right, the Greeks determined the earth was round. So the word really got to Chris that the world was round. He was giving Queen Isabella a little snow job. So anyway, from trading with them, you also know that India was at 15 degrees north latitude. So if you look at the globe, here's Spain, where Christopher Columbus started, and he sailed down along the coast of Africa, which, as I said earlier, was done years and years before that, to the Cape Verde Islands, which happens to be at latitude 15. Now, if you take and go follow the latitude 15 all the way across to the other side of the world, you come to India, which happens to be at latitude 15. So Christopher, he wasn't dumb, all right? He figured, hey, I'm just going to follow the latitude, because at that time they were able to constantly, through using a quadrant, keep their position on the latitude line by taking bearings at noontime or taking bearings on the North Star at night. So they could stay, just like I'm pointing to Steve right now, they could stay on that latitude 15. He didn't know how far, though, India was from Spain, because they didn't know anything about longitude. All right, he had no idea he had no idea how far away India was. He was going there strictly to trade with India, all right, not to prove the world was round. There was one thing that he did do, though. He found the West Indies. Why is it called the West Indies? Because he was going west, and because he thought it had something to do with India. He was a long way from India, so he named it the West Indies. Right? The one thing he did find, though, is our whole continent. Nobody knew that North America or South America even existed. Nobody in 1492 knew that the piece of land there. So what happened when he went back to Spain, he started telling everybody, hey, there's land out there. They started going and charting the coastline. They went ashore. They had spread VD. They spread smallpox. They killed Indians. They did a lot of crazy things, all right? All in the name of settling the continent that we have. So anyway, if it wasn't for him, there's a good chance that we'd still be looking for America and South America. But anyway, all right, we're ready to sail from north to south, but not east to west. Didn't know what longitude meant. He had no idea, or did anybody else. We could compute latitude, but not longitude, until 1759, which is 265 years in nautical history, when John Harrison, who was an Englishman, developed the chronometer. These watches with all these crazy dials are a chronometer. And I have a ship's clock on the wall of my apartment that was 40 years, and I'm telling you, from spring to fall, that clock didn't lose any time at all. I just sent the Weems and Plath, who made the clock up in Annapolis, after 40 years, it was starting to lose a little time, and they put a whole new mechanism in for me. But the reason you have to keep time goes back to the 15-degree increments we have. Here we are in Egypt, and here we are in Mobile. The time is different, so you have these 15-degree increments going around the world. They had all kind of crazy ideas of how to keep time until he created the clock. One of them being the sand glass, little like making your 3-minute eggs, you know, or which turn out to be 4-minute eggs. All right, now you gotta picture this. Here's this guy behind the wheel of a ship, the sails, it's blowing, he's rocking and rolling. All right, he's got an hourglass there that he has to turn every half hour. All right, and not only does he have to turn every half hour, he's got to go and hit the bell. All right, so at noon he got 8 bells, ding, 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 8 times. All right, at the same time steering, at the same time turning this thing around. You think it was a little inaccurate? So until the watch was invented, they really had no control over where they were longitude-wise. Finally, navigation in any direction. Why is time important? It allows the navigator to calculate at noon using the sun or at night by the stars, which I had previously mentioned, where he was in relationship to a starting point. The point being the meridian, which is the line of latitude, or longitude, line of longitude at Greenwich, England. Now the reason it's at Greenwich, England was because the gentleman who created the watch happened to be English. So if you look, let me get the pointer. If you look here at England and draw a straight line, you'll see I darkened this right here. That is the 0 line of longitude. So everything to the west of that is westerly. Why do we call it, what do we call it when the Cowboys went out here? They went out where?
West.
They went out west, all right? So here's the 0, here's us. They went west out here. So everything going this way is west. Everything to the international date line, which is out here, all right, is going to the east. Why is this politically called the Near East? Why is this called the Far East? Because you're going from Greenwich, England at 0 to the east, or from Greenwich, England to the international date line to the west. Knowing this, you could get a fix. You could get a fix by a number of ways. Number one, you know what your latitude was by figuring the angle. Number two, by keeping track of the time, all right? And let's do it with the noon. So here I am leaving any place on Earth, and I go from noon time right here, and I go all the way over here to noon time, and I check the time, all right? And it took me so long to go that distance, I'm able to calculate where I am on a line of longitude in relationship to 0. And it's done strictly by time. Call a fix. I'm going to pass around 6 of these. I'm going to pass these around so you get a proximity of being at the North Pole. So you understand when you're there. And it shows all the lines of longitude converging toward the North Pole. So if you will, take a couple and then pass some over there if you would for me. While you're looking at those, I want to read a story to you. This happens to be a true story. The year was 1899. The SS, or Ramo, was sailing from Vancouver, which is Canada, to Australia. As they neared the international date line, which is out here in the Pacific, right here, as they neared the international date line and the equators, which is right here, here's Vancouver, they were heading toward Australia. All right. The navigator realized that they could cross both the date line and the equator at midnight. As they came to both lines, they stopped, realizing the bow was in January 1st, the year 1900, in the 20th century. It was also in the southern hemisphere. Once you cross the equator, you're in the southern hemisphere. The stern was in the year 1899, in the 19th century. And the date was the 31st of December. And the ship was also in the northern hemisphere. The ship was therefore in 2 different days, 2 different years, and 2 different hemispheres, and 2 different centuries all at the same time. Something for, and this is for real. The navigator just realized he was going to cross the international date line and the equator at the turn of the century. So, very interesting. You can see by looking at the papers that I just sent around that the further north you go, the harder it is to navigate because the lines of longitude start converging all together. So it's a little harder to imagine that 15-degree element that you have normally. All right, let's now take a sail from Lisbon, which is in Portugal, to the Delaware Bay. Known facts. Lisbon is at latitude 38 degrees, 44 minutes, 13 seconds north. It is at longitude 009, 08 minutes, 34 seconds west. So it is 9 degrees west of the mean zero that I showed you earlier, down through England. So if we draw a line from Lisbon to Delaware Bay across the Atlantic Ocean, we determine our true course, and I already have done this. Our true course was 200. Oh, let me back up. What do you notice that's interesting between the 2 locations? You have this right here and Delaware Bay right here. What do you see that is?
Same left. Same north. Same degrees north. Close.
They're actually 8 degrees difference. So if you're going back to 1 minute of latitude, 1 minute of latitude. Here's our minutes. Oops, right here. 1 minute of latitude is 1 nautical mile. So the entrance to Delaware Bay just happens to be 8 nautical miles above Lisbon's Portugal, if you draw a straight line between the 2 of them. Now we have a true compass course of 272 degrees. And you notice there's a T next to that? Meaning, if I'm the navigator and I finish my watch and Gene takes over for me, he knows that I have figured it to be a true course, not a magnetic course. So if he's now picking up the navigation, he knows that I used a true course. There's a little problem using the true course. When you take the compass and you think the compass is pointing to where Santa Claus is up there at the north, it really isn't. What happens here in Canada, somewhere right about here, up in Canada near Hudson Bay, there's a large magnetic field. So you have to picture on the compass now. So I'm supposed to be pointing toward Santa Claus, but this magnetic field right here is, and I'm crossing the Atlantic Ocean down here, is pulling the magnetic compass toward that big glob of metal over here, which is called compass variation. And it changes all over the world. So if I'm down here, all right, it's being pulled. If I get closer up here, it's almost pulling the compass directly west. A couple of years ago, I moved the yacht twice from Cape Hardy, British Columbia, which is way up here, to Seattle, 5-day trip. And the variation going from on the west coast, think here's the glob of metal, was pulling the compass to the east. Where we live, the compass gets pulled to the west. All right, here we are over here. All right, so when you're on the west coast, the magnetic compass is actually being pulled to the east. So you have to do a calculation to get back on track. The easiest way is to spend a lot of money and have a gyro compass, which takes this error out, or an electronic compass, which takes the error out, or something else that we're going to talk about that makes all this easy is the GPS. The GPS, in the GPS, there's a program that says, hey, guess what, the further north I get and the compass is being pulled over, I'm going to just change the course. I mean, so I did the math here for you, all right? How many of you have taken algebra in high school or college? Look at all the hands go up. Everybody's in a panic. All right, let's talk about algebra. Here's a simple equation. D equals ST. All right, as you know, both sides of the equation have to equal each other. And you can, whatever you do on one side of the equation, you have to do on the other side of the equation. So it's a very simple thing. Guess what? We use this all the time. If you have to go to Pensacola, you're doing it in your head. Oh, let's see, Pensacola is what, 35 miles? I'm going to go 70 miles an hour. How long is it going to take me to get to Pensacola? We're doing this automatically. But when you're on a ship or a boat someplace, you have to go do the math. So if you do the math, it just so happens that from Lisbon to Delaware Bay is 2,954 nautical miles, and we're going to go at 20 knots. All right, so I do the math, 20 knots, I'm going to find out how much time it's going to take me to go from Lisbon, Spain, or Lisbon, Portugal, to the mouth of the Delaware Bay. And it just so happens when I do this 60D Street, the time comes to 147.7 hours, which ends up being 6 days, 3 hours, and 6 minutes. Why is that important? Because when you're running a ship and you have to pick up a pilot at the beginning of Delaware Bay, all right, you got to be able to tell the pilot, hey, I'm going to be there in 4 hours. He's radio in ahead or whatever period of time he ends up doing. So it's very important. Not only that, If you've ever crossed the ocean in a ship, boy, you say, God almighty, I only got 2 more days of looking at this water. You know what? It gets to be the same. I think I've seen all the times I've done it, I've seen flying fish and 1 whale. So, is everybody with me?
No,
No?
but go ahead.
Okay.
I'm still here.
What happened to your son? I don't see the son anymore.
There are toys inside the son to play with.
Change it, Joe? But what if we're in the United States? All right? What if you want one, you can quit?
Sunset.
Sun setting.
This starts a whole, now we've already crossed the ocean, which was easy. If you think about it, the navigation across the ocean is relatively easy, unless you have to change course a couple of times because of some other reason. But for most part, you're talking about straight line navigation. The cruise I just took was from Boston to Bermuda. It was one shot. The captain came up with a course to say he did a 60 D Street, and you know what? He went to his cabin and took a nap. All right? Because it was a straight line shot from Boston to Bermuda, and conversely coming back. This starts with a whole new series of problems in navigation rules. Inland rules in the United States are a set unto themselves. Navigation-wise, we follow the ILB International, which is the International Association of Lighthouse Authority rules. If you notice, there's a B here. B, there happens to be A. So if you follow the rules of B, starting with the adage saying, red right returning, if you've ever heard that term from boating, as you're coming in from sea, red right returning, meaning the red buoys on your right-hand side. That only holds true with ILB. If you go to Madeira, which is an island controlled by Portugal, they're on ILA. So as you're coming into Madeira, all right, the green is on your right-hand side. So you have to look in the book, if you're the captain, and find out whether you're on ILA or ILB. It just so happened on this trip that I took, as we're going into Bermuda, their system is ILB, the same as we're used to. So all the red buoys were on the port side, or I'm sorry, the starboard side of the ship as we're coming into Bermuda. We also have on the system what is known as a lateral system. So the aids to navigation, the ATONs, are all numbered. So later on, when you get up and look at this chart coming into Mobile Bay, you have number 2 red down here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. On the green side, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. So now we're going to build a tree. Doesn't go with the rest of what I'm talking about, but it does. Okay, Joe. Here's a picture of what I just talked about. Here we're coming in from sea. Forget these arrows right here. That's going back out. Here we are coming in from sea. There's red, 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 red on the starboard side. If you notice, there's 2, 4, 6, 8. Now, the type of buoy doesn't make any difference. 2 could actually be what they call a day beacon. So they're just showing the different types. This is a full buoy with lighted, could have a bell. Now, this is called a nun. The reason it's called a nun is beyond me. Other than somebody with a lot of wisdom said, hey, this looks like what nuns used to wear on their head. You go to you see that right, Martha? You never see a nun with a buoy on her head? Well, that's why they're called nuns, which it goes back to the triangular shape. And on the other side, if you notice a can, which is simple, and a square, all right? And the green side, which would be the port side coming in from sea. So you're coming in from the sea this way. The red buoys are on your right, and it's a lateral system, 2, 4, 6, 8, all right? 1, 3, 5, 7, and keep going. Now the reason I say you're building a tree, because if you come over here and look at coming into Mobile Bay, you come in here and they're all numbered just the way I pointed, until you get up to here. There's a channel that goes over here to the western shore. That channel is a branch of the tree. It's a limb of the tree off the main trunk. So this starts again with 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever, right? Here's another one up here, which by the way happens to be blown up over here into Mobile itself. So again, all the markers coming in here, which is the same as here, start with 2 again, 2, 4, 6, 8. All right, so wherever you go, with the exception of down here, which we'll talk about in a little while, all right? But any time you branch off that main trunk, it's like a tree. So you always start again with the numerical lateral system of 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7 on the other side. If you look here, all right, coming in from sea, right here, red, that's, I won't even talk about that, it's a change so this is the main channel, red, 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 you're coming up the main channel, green, green, green. All right, now here's a secondary channel. You go over here, here's red 2, all right, green 3. If you go into this area here, which they show up here, all right, again, you would have 2 and 3. So they're all branches coming off the main trunk of the tree, with the exception of this red line here, which is the Intracoastal Waterway, which is right here, all right, which we'll talk about in just a second. This is really a simple system. If you always concentrate on what side of the ship or boat the color should be, and by the way, the numerical things are twofold. One, they tell you where you are, and number 2, if you have an emergency, you can always say, hey, I'm a green 3, all right? You're calling the Coast Guard, so it gives them your location as to where you are.
That one's the wrong way, huh?
All right, navigating the ICW, Intercoastal Waterway. It's a very simple system, and this is the easiest way to remember it. All the aids to navigation on the mainland side are red. This is easy, the redneck side. All the rednecks live on the mainland side of the Intercoastal Waterway. If you look at it, the green is the beach side, which is the money side. Now that runs all the way from Port Arthur, Texas to Boston, Massachusetts, with the exception of a few areas, one being the Big Bend here in Florida, all right, as it makes the bend. And the reason being that the water is shallow there, and the idea of, let me back up, the idea of the ICW was to transport goods inland from Texas, mainly oil, all the way to the East Coast. So, because of World War II, the Germans were sinking ships like crazy off the coast. So they started building the ICW, and which has a controlled depth of 12 feet. So you could move oil on barges from Texas all the way to the Northeast. The Big Bend, there is no ICW because they figured that the subs can't get in far enough to sink anything that went out into the Gulf of Mexico. Up in North Carolina, the same thing. Albemarle Sound and all, as you go up the East Coast, there's no way. Same thing with like when you came down through the Chesapeake Bay or through the Delaware Bay and then picked the ICW up and ran inland again. The only place you really went outside is from Manasquan, New Jersey to New York Harbor and then go up the East River and out Long Island Sound. So there was an area between Manasquan and New Jersey and the New York Harbor where ships had, or the barges had to go out into the Atlantic, but they were close enough to shore. I think if you know anything about the history, the Navy had a blimp base in Lakehurst, New Jersey, so they had the blimps along the coast there looking for German submarines. The only difference between the ICW and the rest of the chart is the ICW again has the lateral system. If you look at the chart here, coming from Pensacola, going over toward Port Arthur, you'll see the numbers get increased, and then it goes back to 2 over here, 2, 4, 6, 8, all right, and the ICW markers all have a yellow marker on them, so it defines that they are part of that. And it's instead of nautical miles, it's in statute miles, which is 5,280 feet to a mile. Okay, Jim. Questions?
A few minutes ago, one of the ladies that I know quite well, working on a booth, tapping on the shoulder, said, "It's lunchtime."
Well, you have a choice. You can either tell everybody about your sailboat, or you can go to lunch. I don't want to see you starve. Anybody have any questions here today? I know at times this got a little complex, but the main point is that we've been able to establish, establish where we are in the world. And this little thing actually is one of the first generation GPSs that happens to still work. And I take this with me any place in the world and know where I am. I've used this going from across the ocean, getting up every morning at 8 o'clock because I plotted the course just for my own edification. And being able to just go on the balcony of a ship and get a fix, all right, a fix. Remember we use that word, latitude and longitude crossing, all right, on this little first generation GPS and know where I was in the world. And by the way, everybody in this room has a different number. You have a different number than over here. Everybody has their own individual latitude and longitude, if you think about it, because you're moving from one spot to the other. So this is, and by the way, this has been to the South Pole, as close to the South Pole as you can get without it freezing. It's still cold. All right, questions?
Why do they call the nautical mile a knot? Why do they call the nautical mile a knot?
The nautical mile, as I said, is 1 minute of latitude. That's what generates a nautical mile. Rather than saying nautical miles per hour, like it would, they use the term knot. Instead, the derivation of the word knot, I can't answer for you. But
It's the first part of nautical.
okay, but it's still
It's K-N-O-T.
yeah, K-N-O-T. Yeah, but instead of saying knots per hour, like you would miles per hour, they use the term nautical. It's just a confusion, John. Anybody else? All right, thank you. I'm sure it's
Even those out.